I have to request again.
Let's see here. That one right there, right?
There you go, yeah.
And
It was 12 things.
12.
There you go. Goodbye.
There we go.
I don't know what happened, guys.
Sorry about that. Technical difficulties, of course. We're just waiting for Paresh to sign in for us. Waiting for his precious.
You could be headphone, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I guess while we wait for Paresh, I mean, we can continue, discussing. And once he jumps in, he can. I think that's him right there, actually. Ooh. There we go.
You're back.
Hello.
I'm back. I am so sorry. I don't know what happened. So technical difficulty. Sorry.
No worries.
We don't know if it's RC
We were
so.
honestly we were doing so well. This was exactly like my worst nightmare. I did not want this to happen, and it's exactly what happened. Of course. So here we are.
So, we always say like that's to be like conversational. In technical, always going to happen, no matter what.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, as I was saying, so in that study, he said that like the rooms, spaces, like enhance our mental health, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then from that's the kind of like we wanted to start to talk a little bit in the wellness series, like how design can enhance the mental health. It can make us feel good, can make us feel better as a human being, right? And then the first thing that we want to talk about, like, it was how layout design can enhance mental health, right? So I mean, we can bring, in terms of design wise, we can bring like textures, patterns, layout, colors. I mean, layout is one of the big things. For example, when I'm designing, one of the big things, even for landscape as well, I believe, we in the space planning, it's so fundamental for us do like a very well designed space and planning, just because, as we know, something that is out of order make us feel lost. Like it makes us feel stressed. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
Right. And as you know, I mean, probably you know better, Paresh. For example, on a stress mood and a stress mindset, if the space is not helping you, that's just gonna get worse, right?
Right.
Like I think the stimulus that we have, like when things is kind of like out of order, it's messy at the worst say, right? It's really messy. So how can you speak a little bit more about that thing, that when the environment is out of order, we get stressed, we get like weird.
Yeah, no, I would say for us as human beings, I think we all love structure, right? We also enjoy predictability. We enjoy things when they make sense. When things start to not make a lot of sense, then we start to get really confused. We start to get stressed out. We start to worry what's going on around us. Our environment doesn't seem to be supporting us in the way that we want it to. One of the things you brought up that was really interesting was that when you're thinking about spaces, I actually found a study that there's actually different parts of the brain for architects and designers that get activated when developing layouts. So depending on whether you go with an open concept space versus maybe like a space that has more like closed layouts or closed rooms, cozy nooks, things like that, those types of parts of the brain get activated differently. Also, depending on what type of space you're working with from the get-go, right? So if you're walking into a space and the layout is all over the place, it doesn't seem to make a lot of sense, there's going to be a lot of different parts of your brain kind of activated to try to think of how do I get this back in order? How do I correct this? Right? So it's a sense of like we like orderliness, we like predictability. So when it comes to layout, absolutely. Yeah, so it causes a lot of stress, and from a health standpoint and from a physiological standpoint, I think it's important to note that stress is, if we think about it kind of at a more biomarker biological level, you're going to have higher levels of cortisol. You're going to have other kind of health markers too, where your heart rate is faster, your blood pressure can go up, you get sweaty palms, you're kind of in a really anxious state or sometimes even irritable state. So that's when you kind of know that you're in an environment that's not really conducive to what you're needing at the time. So that's
Yeah,
what causes that stress.
yeah. And I think another element that comes with that too is colors, right, Daniel?
Mm-hmm.
Especially when we are doing landscape, our projects always come like very colorful, and even like it's even funny because personally I'm not a very colorful person in terms of my personal choices. However, for our clients, we always try to introduce like a bold color or a color that's going to speak to them because the psychology behind, right?
Yeah.
For example, we know that greens brings like that refresh, uh, calming mood as in the opposite, like the oranges and reds bring like the energy, the boost of energy for some rooms as well. So that was the big things that we kind of like see on the how these elements can enhance your mental health as well.
Right. And I also have to just kind of add to that is, you know, we do have these specific colors that have this psychological connection to it as well. And like Roma's, I'd like to focus on like the color of green too. I mean, bringing the color of green in is like almost kind of like a biophilic way of design of bringing that color of nature inside. And if you think about it, like when we spend about what 90% of our time inside the house or inside indoors, and then we go outside, I mean within 20 to 30 seconds of going outside, you immediately are feeling yourself lower cortisol, your stress levels are down, you're able to breathe, things don't seem so heavy on your chest and your shoulders anymore, and that's within the 20 30 seconds of just going outside. So just kind of bringing those colors, those outside colors in through biophilic design as well is just another way and another attempt to, uh, you know, design around your wellness as well
Yeah,
too. So very powerful way of adding to that.
absolutely. And I think from like a psychological perspective, even like an evolutionary perspective, right? I think humans weren't really meant to be indoors. I
Yeah.
think the Environmental Protection Agency, there's actually a statistic out there that humans spend, or at least Americans, I'll say, maybe for the people abroad, they spend more time outdoors, but in America at least, we're spending like 90% of our time indoors, whether that's in in our own home, whether that's in a building for work, or if we're at school or wherever the case may be. So when we're spending 90% of our time at home, we miss out on nature for that amount of
Oh,
time
yeah.
too, right? Right. And then if you think about it, just kind of like evolutionarily speaking, humans, yeah, weren't meant to be indoors for that amount of time.
No.
We used to live out in on the land, basically. And then, of course, you think about industrialization and all of these other things that took place over time in era. So, so it I agree with you. I think one of the best ways to bring in a more calming, almost aligning sense of design with somebody is to bring in biophilia.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, is that my approach that we bring in every project that we do, especially interiors, is to bring the nature inside. Just because it has a study too. I think if I'm not wrong, it was like 1980s. It was in Japan. The study was called like the forest bathing. So it was because as you know the Japanese culture in terms of work, they work in such a fast pace, so doctors and environmentalists, they were like prescribing a forest bathing for people because, as Daniel said, like in 30 seconds, 40 seconds, the cortisol will decrease in their body because they're around of greeneries. And that was kind of like one of the big things that we saw, like when you design, especially like landscape. you bring in this therapeutic garden sometimes
Yeah,
in the
I was
project.
glad you brought that up because I mean we've talked a lot about how things within our built environment, our inside environment affects us. But you do have stressors and triggers that are even on the outside as well too, from allergies to sun pollution, that sort of thing as well too, that can cause that. But there's a lot of different things that you can do in the landscape that helps with that. I mean, as I said earlier, like just going outside. First 20 seconds immediately does that, but you can add more things to your landscape that will provide that well-being and that lower that stress level, everything. And one of the things that Romesh was talking about is I found it very interesting. There is a way of designing where it's called therapeutic gardens, and a lot of hospitals are actually catching on to this. And this is not something that's new. It's been around, since the 40s and the 50s, but a lot of data and research is coming out to show that when these therapeutic gardens are actually designed for people that are not just able to walk in the garden, but also people who are in wheelchairs or people who are even bedridden. Whenever you're designing those plants to where they can function and meet those people in an elevated state, meaning in a chair or a bed, it allows them to heal more. So there's like scientific proof that just being around plants, being outdoors, surrounding yourself to that actually not only just helps your well-being, but it can even add positivity and help you heal faster than if you did not, while being inside and indoors as well too.
Yeah.
And I think that's why a lot of hospitals have not only focused on the outdoors, but they wanted to bring that outdoors indoors as well too, because there's a lot of different great functions. Just bringing a beautiful plant inside of a room, aesthetically, yes, it's gorgeous, but it also can help reduce stress, fatigue, being out there. Even studies show that even just going and touching an actual leaf, a leaf inside your home,
Yep.
can reduce your stress and actually cause a calming effect, which is so crazy. So, that's why a lot of these big institutions, as well as, residential design, is starting to making sure that those design elements are both indoors and outdoors as well too. So it's super cool.
Absolutely. And, I was just going to say, as someone who works in the hospital, it's a very sterile environment. A lot of the times it's all about efficiency. It's about getting that patient help. And, it oftentimes can, just be very sterile for people. And so there's been studies, I know, like, I think it was like West Virginia University, they did a study where they basically looked at incorporating like green spaces within the hospital or having like gardens or things like that. Even if they weren't necessarily for the purpose of like healing, just like having plants there inside the building was actually very immediately like reduce the stress for patients, for the staff, and the visitors. So like family members of patients. So there's also that piece. And then if you take it back even further, like for a long time with therapeutic gardens, like they used to incorporate that as a regular thing in hospitals. And then I think over time with industrialization and then like the focus on we need space for all the patients and efficiency and all those things, some of that kind of got lost over the years. And then I'd probably say there was another study, I think we've talked about it before, but it was a famous study where they had patients who had like a abdominal procedure. I think it was a gallbladder surgery or something like that. And basically they had them in a room where the window was facing a brick wall. And then they had them in a room where they were facing like a more of like a nature scene, like, there's trees outside or something like that. And even that alone made a difference. And they actually were able to reduce the length of hospital stay just with that. So there are healing properties. So even if the plant is not inside, like if it's even outside and it's in at least your view, it's a lot more healing. So I thought that was really just like really powerful to speak on that, even from like if you take it to a healing perspective of somebody who's like truly, truly ill. And then I think there was a question here earlier that somebody had asked about Is it the sunlight or the color alone or something along those lines? So I think it's a lot of different things. So sunlight also activates kind of vitamin D in our body, and vitamin D is actually a really important vitamin for all of us. It's actually, if you have low levels of vitamin D, it's actually been associated with depression and anxiety and other mood disorders as well. So it would make sense that if we're spending 90% of our time indoors, we're not going outside, getting that sunlight, getting that experience and exposure to the greens and nature, then we're going to have low levels of vitamin D, and then naturally that can develop into other conditions.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so true. So true. I love all of that.
Yeah. And also too, now in a more up level in terms of like the biophilic and the greenery and the nature. I mean, I think nature is such a fixed pattern in our DNA, right? Because of years and years and evolving in terms of being humans. So I believe that kind of like resemble like being nature. I think that's why it's so important. But on in terms of design too, like for example, things that can trigger our brain in terms of stress is the comfort, right? So we play a lot with acoustics. It's a big element in our projects, like how we can reduce the acoustics for, inside of a room, right? How can kind of like get like the comfort body, the comfort experience inside of the space. I think this is one of the big things that always try to bring into a project in terms of to reduce the stress, right? I think stress is everybody's so stressed out nowadays, especially us here in America. So the more practice, the more like elements they put to reduce that, the better.
Yeah, I agree.
Absolutely. There was a comment that I saw here earlier. Somebody added in that sometimes when they go to the hospital, they'll see like somebody playing the piano or a cello or something like that.
Yes.
That is very true. There's even, I've seen somebody play the harp in the hospital, and it is a very healing thing. There's a lot of frequencies that are, that come from music that can be very healing. And it's something that is, again, going back to, are we activating our senses the way we want to, right? So that those types of modalities and thinking about those senses is really important.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I saw a question from Ria. Hi, Ria. If green design overlaps, or is part of the feng shui of Vastu? I believe those interconnect, right?
Absolutely.
Feng shui in Vastu, I think, is a technique that we can put in a space. It goes more as a technique, but the green goes, I think, in and out in all those techniques. Again, I believe it brings with that there's such how I say it's such a good pattern. Nature is such a pattern that's so ingrained in our DNA.
Right.
So I believe that those gonna go in and out in those techniques. So it's really really nice.
Absolutely.
Now, what would be like because we want to give like some practical tips, right? To give back on that topic, right? How can we reduce stress? How can we design it for comfort? How we can bring those inside of our homes? So I believe one of the big tips, one is layout, right? I mean, a home without clutter, it's a home, right? Clutter brings stress.
Yeah.
No matter what. And it goes, I think, to the landscape as well, especially for landscape, right? I think landscape is another technique. It's a live thing they have to take care of.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
But I mean, landscape plays a lot on terms of like same things that you find on the interiors. I mean, you have the hardscape experiences that will have a specific function that you want to have the outdoor space to function directly towards you. And so designing that functional experience in every space in the outdoors is just as important as it is in the indoors as well too, because you want to be able to function. And if you can't function through that space, then that's really all you're going to really focus on. You're not going to focus on the positive, positivity that you're receiving from that. But also, what are some other tips too is, and this is just, this kind of plays back on a comment that was made earlier by Dee Dee with Delaney Designs. But she had mentioned that plants also, clean the air.
Yeah.
So one of the things that we could do as a tip is not just adding the plant in the room for you to have that lower stress level, but also have that cleaner environment too. So adding plants in there, and it actually, you can go to NASA. NASA is actually a really good resource. NASA, I think they update every 5 years the top 10 most air purifying plants for you. So it's not something that you have to go and get a specialist, or don't think it's for you because you don't find the right plant. You can literally go to that list and it can tell you everything that you need to put in there. And a lot of these are low light plants, very easygoing plants, but they will clean out the air as much as possible. So that's another really good design tip, I think, that you can do both indoors and keep outdoors as well too.
Yeah.
So one question though. So what is your advice for the people who say they can't have real plants in their home? Like, what is your advice for them, because it's kind of difficult to maintain? Is there any, like, is it okay to have artificial plants by kind of y'all's standards, or is it something that you would probably advise, just looking for something a little bit less, like, lower maintenance?
I would say, so going on the artificial side. So, I mean, especially technology today, I mean, they've made artificial plants look so real, so
Yeah.
real. And I think, in my opinion, I think artificial could be great for some people. However, I do think over time, the artificial can start wear and tear on your mental state, because then eventually it will become a sort of stressor, because if you're not cleaning it enough, it's causing too much dust, it's picking up too much dust, then you will, you'll have that stressor of like, oh crap, this is just another thing I'm gonna have to clean, sort of thing. So that eventually will add to that. So I always suggest going with natural, just because it has so much more benefits than artificial. And there are plants out there. There's like I'll use the common names for them, but like snake plants for one. Those are low light plants. They do really well. You have to water them maybe once a month, maybe twice a month in the summer. Depends on how much light they are receiving or not receiving. But there's times where you can just forget about them, and they're very forgiving. And also too, the snake plants I don't know if NASA's changed their list, but they've been typically one of the top 3 most environmentally impacting plants to clean your and purify your air.
Yeah, Jake is saying succulents too. Succulents are real plants.
Succulents, yeah.
They're great.
Succulents are really great plants. You don't even have to put them in soil. You can put them in stone or rock. And yes, as long as put them in a windowsill, if you just think about them, spray a water bottle over them, because they're more or less really wanting the humidity than anything else. So succulents are really great, especially if you're not looking to go with like a big snake plant, or I don't know, a Dracaena tropical plant or anything else. Start small and then work your way up as well too.
I was also going to say, I think, like, if it maybe feels daunting or overwhelming to get a real plant to manage, I think if you're able to incorporate like nature motifs, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Right? So that
Kind of
would
like natural elements as jute rugs. Jute is a fiber. So I mean, I think even if they bring like a more organic design, right? Bringing those organic elements, it could be like a stone, a side table made by stone. You're bringing the nature inside, no matter what. So it's kind of like bringing those nature elements inside of the home, just bringing the biophilic approach right. I think another big thing too in terms of tips is the colors, right? I think play with colors is so important. And again, we don't need to be bold. We don't need to paint like a red wall or like a orange or green wall. However, it could be like in a decor. It could be like a accent color on a pillow, on a sofa. Things that is going to kind of like play with your mental health. And I mean, colors is so big in psychology in terms of like how that can play with your mood. So it's nice to have like bring colors on that as well.
I was also going to it might even be nice to kind of have like a more neutral base. So if you went with some like more like neutral tones,
Exactly.
then you kind of have that flexibility to play with color depending on your mood or depending on the season for what you're looking for. Because and then it'll be a more cost-effective way even to kind of adjust your design with time. Because I know there's like colors in color psychology aside from green. I know we've talked about that, but blue also brings a sense of peace and calm for people. Purple can actually help with attention. And then maybe there's times where you want red and orange and you want some of those bolder colors that kind of boost energy for you, right? And it just might depend on that season of your life at that time.
Yeah.
So having the ability to have like the warm neutral base and then having the pops of colors in and out depending on what you're looking for is also, I think, a really like nice kind of a smart and cost-effective
Yeah.
way to design.
One that like we do have a project. It was the Oscar project that we designed a wellness room.
Mm-hmm.
It was like to give the comfort, to give like the reduced stress room for the client. And again, we went bold. We went like green wall colors. You know, a jute rug to bring in the nature. We put like now I think it's a Rica palm that we saw.
We put a Rica palm.
A Rica palm there, you know, like textures with the wallpaper. It was such a nice environment. In up to today, the clients say like every time that I come in here stressed out, I leave the room no stress, way like better with myself. So it's
I'm also
really nice.
curious about I'm also curious about like the before and after of that, right? So like what was the space like when you first like entered it? Was it just like white walls,
White
you know,
walls,
White walls, concrete
concrete
floor,
concrete
floor,
floors?
nothing.
Okay.
Yes.
no window treatments. It was as clean slate as a clean slate you could possibly get without having to just start from the studs up.
Yeah.
It was fun. It was a lot of fun, and just kind of go back to what Rome said. I mean, this client, we designed a full room around that space, and one of the things, I guess, one of the takeaways that I always found so interesting is that you don't necessarily need a full room to do space. If you have a small little space, we can even just a nook, a vignette that gives you that serenity and gives you that kind of warmth and calmness. You don't think about it, but really and truly, it does make a world of difference. It doesn't matter the size of the space. It really will help with your well-being. Always.
Absolutely. I think a lot of homes, I think like more modern builds, especially, they're like very open spaces. And sometimes like those smaller spaces kind of get neglected or forgotten about or not incorporated as much into the design. And I think depending on the kind of person you are, you may want that. So like an example of a reason for like from a psychological perspective of why somebody may want a more closed in space is probably like they want comfort. They're seeking safety, right? That's kind of, if you really think about it, our home, like at baseline, regardless of design or anything else, it needs to provide a shelter and it needs to keep us safe, right? Like that's like first and foremost. And so having kind of the coziness factor, having closed in spaces for a lot of people can be very, very comfortable. So having a balance, I think, is really nice in your home or in your workplace to have those kind of like in and out spaces.
Yeah. And I'll just, before we move on, I'm glad that you brought that up, Presh, because I completely forgot. But I don't know if you remember another study that we have is Redstone, where we help them design a little meditation space in their closet. Their closet was massive. And she, like the homeowner, loved the idea of that smallness because it made her feel more comfortable. She could shut the door, keep it nice and cozy, and like I said, safe. So it makes a huge difference, and it's really just based on you and your preference too.
Yeah, I think the other tip too that we even Paris and I were talking about some weeks ago is lining, right?
Mm-hmm.
Lining sound is something that it needs to be strategy on that because lining can enhance your stress or can reduce your stress totally.
Absolutely.
So, but I think that's going to be like a topic that we're going to have to deep dive in, to include in our wellness series live, just because it's such big, massive topic in terms of lighting and sound. So probably going to come that in the next months with that for sure. Now I know you're gonna get like in a Q&A for our episode for tonight. I saw some questions already, so let me scroll up here. I saw the Amy ask about maximalism. It was, yeah, like environment. What about random maximalist vision? Something that knocks you off your heels and makes you scratch your head. So maximalism, it depends how it's designed, right? For example, uh, it depends of the pattern of the room, right? The texture of the pattern of the space. If it's too overwhelming, it goes back to the stimulus in the brain, right? Fresh.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
if it's too overwhelmed, it's Wade. Sorry, Wade.
Oh,
If it's too overwhelmed, you're gonna scratch your head because it's something out of order, right? It's something that is a little clutter in the space.
Mm-hmm.
So when in maximalism it's designed properly on a good way, it can be very peaceful. It can be very outstanding design, right?
and I think it goes back to maximalist. Even though going back to what you were saying, I think it goes back to the design elements that as going into design school is like the first thing they drill into your head is like balance, form, line. Even though that maximalist kind of blurs the boundaries of those, if you continue to keep that balance within that maximalist form, then that balance tends to lower the stress level as well too. If you're doing a balance, if you're doing a maximalist where it's just no balance and everything is just boom in your face, yeah, I really truly agree. I feel like most people are going to scratch their head or not fully understand what the reasoning for each individual decision with that design piece. So I think we always got to have to consider balance, form, and line every time, even if we're going maximalist or if we're going minimalist, transitional, anything of that sort. Those are always your basic functions you want to stick with when you're first moving into a space and designing.
I think it goes back what Paresh said. Like we need order, right?
Yes.
That's how our
Yeah.
brain
We
works.
need order. We need to, and there's nothing wrong with maximalist design. I think maximalist design can be a lot of fun. I think it can show tons of personality. It's an opportunity to really highlight lots of color. It also offers an opportunity to even be eclectic and kind of play with different textures, fabrics, prints, patterns, all of those things.
Yeah.
I think the key there is so that you don't feel overstimulated by all of it at once. I think it's best to maybe concentrate it in certain areas. So you kind of need to have some aspects of your space where the structure or the form of the actual space kind of create some hard lines for you so that you
Yes.
can kind of have the opportunity to blur them a little bit. So an example could be if you know you're going to go maximalist on a wall with like the artwork and then you're also going to incorporate shelving or something like that, maybe for that particular shelving unit you might want to go with closed storage,
Yeah.
right, to balance like the art gallery there instead of it just being all open shelving plus all this like artwork kind of in an eclectic pattern. That might be a lot, right? So I think balance is really key. And I think, yeah, somebody here put balance with the green check mark. So
Yes,
absolutely.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
That's way.
absolutely. Yeah, yeah. No, I see another. It's kind of like another question, but people that feel overstimulated with colors, right?
Yeah.
So that is one of the big things too that we designers, and I believe Paresh is gonna know better on that. It's when you're designing, like how that person, how the end user is going to receive that, right?
Mhm.
That's one of the big things. For example, in our process, we do have like a massive questionnaire that we're gonna ask about colors, and we're gonna ask the reason behind you like a color, you don't like a color,
Mhm.
because that's where we are going to see like which direction the designer can go.
Yeah.
Right. And when the people, we do have clients that say like, oh, I'm not a huge fan of colors. It's like,
Mhm.
okay, so we know we can go a little bit neutral, a little bit more natural in the colors. And then we can play with textures. We can play, with another elements in design that's gonna make the room look balanced and like formal in all of that.
I would just say, going back to the questionnaire, if you're doing a design with yourself, and or if you are working with the designer, I strongly encourage you to always lean into being curious. Um, and that's what we tell our clients all the time. And I can tell them, like, usually you're going to get tired of me asking you, like, well, I'm curious about this. What is your why? And always stay curious into what your why is, because if you don't like, if there's a devoid of color that you don't like, lean into that. Find out why. Find out why. Work with your designer and kind of give them that experience and let them know, because that's going to help them, the designer, to understand you better and curate a more dynamic space for you that really will focus on your your well-being. And that's for both indoors and outdoors. I mean, Roman asks the same thing over and over from both our landscape clients and our interior clients. And you know, if you're just doing it yourself, I mean, ask the question, like, what kind of colors do I like? Okay, like those colors. Why do I like those colors? Well, it makes me feel this, makes me feel that. Oh, I hate this color, I hate that color. You do that with everything, and you're going to start seeing a design space start to come together and form with you for you. So I always encourage everybody, just stay curious and always ask your why and understand your why. It's always a good thing.
Jake asked here, do different scents play a part in wellness too? Popularly
Absolutely.
candles in scents, yes.
Yes.
I do have.
Good question.
It's a really good question. So that comes with the sensory design, right? Like all the elements, the senses that we have on the design. And sense is one, as Parash mentioned at the beginning of the live, that sense bring emotions, right? You could be like, you're gonna bring like memories, you're gonna get a stimulus in your body.
Right.
The only thing that Danny and I, we have a little bit particular about is like how we're gonna bring those scents inside of the home, right? Because we can bring with plants if the plant has some scent, like in a natural way, or we can bring artificially too. The artificially way to do it, that it kind of bothers me a little bit, because, for example, sometimes, as you know, even though you're burning incense, you're putting carbon dioxide inside of the home, right? You're burning something. So that can disrupt a little bit of indoor air quality, right? So I mean, just make sure that, for example, after burning incense, open a little bit the windows just to kind of like refresh the indoor quality. It's the same with candles. Like, I prefer going with soil candle because it's less harmful. I'm not saying that it's no harmful. It's less harmful than wax candle, right? So it's just know how to play, how to bring those scents. I'm a huge believer that natural ventilation is something that needs to be very, it has to be an emphasis inside of the home. If you're in there, if your outdoor quality is good, to open a window, even in winter, because stagnant air is another topic that I can geek out, but I'm not going to. But air is something that needs to be in movement all the time. At least, like, if you guys can open the windows 3 times a week, just to like refresh the air, the better.
Yeah.
Just because the indoor air quality is going to just increase instead of decrease.
I wanted to kind of like add on a little bit to what you were saying, Rome, about the effect of scent. So, or like how it works in the brain, basically. So basically, scent is sending signals to the limbic system in your brain. The limbic system in your brain, that section of the brain, basically controls memory and emotion. So that's very accurate what you were saying. And so that's why like positive emotions can oftentimes be elicited by like certain fragrances. So in addition to everything that you guys are saying, I think also fragrance selection is really important. And there's some elements, and I know one of the things we were talking about was like stress, and how to reduce stress, how to increase comfort. And I know for me, because of like that memory and the emotions, like I feel most at home, I think because of how I grew up and just like smelling my mom's Indian food cooking in the kitchen. So if there's ever like Indian food or something cooking, I'm like, that's home. Without me having to go and get like other objects involved in creating these scents. So I think that's also really a fun way to kind of think about scent too. It doesn't have to necessarily be like a candle or something you bring in. It could even be things like maybe like a fragrance that you wear yourself, or something that like your partner wears, or food that gives you a lot of comfort too. That actually can bring in a lot of that sensory calmness that you're looking for.
Yeah.
Yeah. So same thing, and I won't dive too much into it, but you can do the same thing with the plants.
Really great
as well,
questions,
too.
guys.
Yeah, really awesome.
But I mean, now to kind of like close up a little bit, right? I mean, we talk about like how we can improve rooms to reduce our stress, like give it comfort to our lives, and kind of like a practical tips how to bring that to the space, right? So I mean, I think that was kind of like really cool to go over that. We're gonna have an next event probably like sometime in April. We still deciding which day, how that's going to work, but I hope you guys keep kind of like tuned for that. And we are going to invite you guys to subscribe to our newsletter to be going to kind of like post a blog with all the information that we talked today. Also, too, we're gonna do like some snapshots of those videos to our social media too, to kind of like keep it that talk, right? We really want to keep it like the talk through the whole year. If you guys don't follow Paresh, please follow him.
Yes.
Because he's going to be talking about that like from now on as well. And vice versa. If you follow Paresh but don't follow us, follow
Please,
us.
yeah,
And then we
please
can kind
follow
of like,
Lima-Stanley
yeah.
Design. They've been really sweet friends to me through this like whole journey. So please, please, please follow them.
Yeah, so keep tuned. We're gonna post a blog of that, post some videos as well. We're gonna put that in our YouTube channel. So we do have a YouTube channel at Lima-Stanley Design. So if you guys wanna go back there to get like any information, and also to DM us with any questions. I mean,
Yeah.
we can totally geek out in that topic about wellness design and sustainable practices and eco-friendly materials. We're all in on that. So just give a DM, and then if you guys want to work with Paresh too, DM him.
Please.
He's kind of like, we know he's going to just fly high with that topic. So you're very excited with that.
Yeah.
So keep tuned, and then probably in April we're gonna see each other again.
Absolutely.
Right. Okay, Paresh, thank you so much.
Thank you, Paresh.
Thank you,
Appreciate
guys.
it. And thank you, everybody. Yeah, it's been awesome.
All right.
All right.
See you next time, guys.
See you next time.
Bye.
Everyone.